You began playing guitar at the age of 5.
I did.
How serious were you about music right through your childhood?
Well, I had a bad eye as a kid, which is, vision impairment is a musician's best friend. I think social impairment is the next essential factor, but visual impairment is key, I think. And I had an eye that didn't work. I had a patch on it and things. And I was playing records from the time I was 2 or 3. My parents had a little kiddie record player that you couldn't break, and you couldn't hurt yourself with it, so I just played records over and over. And then when I was 5, my brother started taking guitar lessons from the nuns in town. I grew up on a farm in the middle of Iowa, really rural, and the only people who were playing live music at that point were the Franciscan nuns, who had received the okay from the Vatican to be groovy. And he started taking lessons, and then he brought that guitar home, and I said, "How do you do that?" And he taught me 3 chords, and that was the beginning of my life's path.
How you went. What about songwriting? When did you start getting serious about that?
Yeah, getting serious. I sort of meddled around as a teenager, and even in college, I had serious ambitions to be an opera singer, of all things. And I didn't take my songwriting very seriously because I was, aiming for the big stage. And when I took some auditions, when I was 24, and realized that I wasn't Leontine Price, which is something most people realize when they're 6 months old, but it took me quite a few more years to figure it out. After that, I thought maybe I should do something else, and I started writing songs seriously, and people in the folk community said, "Where have you been?" And no one in the classical world ever said to me, "Where have you been?"
Who would have been some of the first songwriters to strike a chord with you?
When I was 20, a Swiss boyfriend played for me the songs of Jacques Brel, and I flipped. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. I thought they were so ingenious. And then I wrote my master's thesis on Kurt Weill and Bert Brecht, so the Threepenny Opera and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a cabaret, there's definitely a cabaret element to some of what I do. And those were big moments. I didn't even hear Joni Mitchell till I was like 19. I didn't know who she was. All we had was Foreigner out there,
That study and training in classical music, were you able to adapt later on when you changed musical styles?
I think what I've retained from that is just ease on stage. You just do a lot of stage time. You're in front of people a lot. So shows are very easy for me to give. I don't suffer from stage fright. My live show is essentially what I do. I happen to make recordings, but giving a live concert, that's my thing. And I had just had great teachers all the way through. People who knew how to help you connect in front of people, and to be honest, to not fake it, to not give in to the obvious mannerism, to not overplay it, to not be, quote, musical, just to be natural and to communicate. I had really good help.
Do you still dabble in classical music for your own enjoyment?
It's a little like Olympic diving, After you've trained to be an Olympic competitor, let's say you give up, let's say you move on to become a person who does something else with your life. You might not go back and dive a lot. It's such a specialized skill. It's so different than the rest of music. To retain the ability to hit your high B flat on command. You need to be doing that pretty much every day.
Yeah, true. You've received a great deal of media acclaim since you began recording. Does that type of thing boost your confidence when concentrating on keeping up and maintaining a quality of voice?
Well, you have to be careful regarding any kind of external input, because any kind of review, let me think, John, how to say this. That's a good question, actually. Sure, good reviews make you feel good, sure, but you have to be careful not to give too much power to anybody else's opinion. At some point, you just do it under your own power.
Yeah.
You write because you write, and because you want to hit this goal. You want to hit the bullseye all by yourself in your little laboratory.
Mm-hmm.
And the longer I do this, the more clear it is that that's the true path, and that's the only way to maintain any kind of happiness. Doing this for a living, because everybody's got an opinion about what you do.
Yeah.
Everybody's got one, and they're not all positive.
Now, you hadn't had a lot of luck with record companies. Your first label, Private Music, got swallowed up by Wyndham Hiller. How unsettling was that to your career at that stage?
At first I was extremely depressed. I went into a dark zone for 2 months or so, but it was because I was misperceiving what it meant. I thought that it had something to do with, I don't know, I thought that it was somehow the end of music. A lot of people, when they lose their deal, they're sort of, they wander in the wilderness for a while. But I didn't lose my deal. My record company simply got eaten up in a corporate buy, and if you sort through the wreckage of that, there's an opportunity, and what it meant for me was that I have an opportunity to do music more the way I want to do it, to refocus my energies and clarify my image and my voice and what I want to do. And in the end, it was a terrific thing. It allowed me to get more freedom to do what I wanted to do. So in a way, I'd highly recommend it. That everybody have a deal go down.
The situation with your current label, Bottom Line, because I think I read they were about to be sold too, is that right?
No, they went through a buy, but they're up and running again. So the next record will probably be with them, yeah.
Ah, good. So everything's nice and smooth there.
Yeah.
There's been a great diversity of styles on your albums too, of musical styles. Do you make a conscious effort to achieve that, or is it just how the songs pan out?
No, I make a conscious effort to try to find a common thread through the songs, because I write whatever shows up, and you know, having a broad musical talent is a blessing and a curse. But I write whatever comes up, and then we try to find songs that somehow fit together. On the Trains record, we had the hidden track, which is "Movie of My Life," that's a cabaret number for sure, and is actually being performed by cabaret performers in New York and Chicago and around the country. Yeah, and a number of my tunes have taken up with cabaret, which is funny to me. It's very funny to me and very gratifying. It's funny to hear somebody else sing your song. But let me think. What exactly did you ask me? I'm sorry, John.
Do you go out of the way to diversify your musical styles on your CDs?
No, absolutely not. I just write whatever comes up, and because I can do a lot of different styles come up.
Yeah.
And while that may make for difficulties in terms of making a recording, it makes a very satisfying live show. I mean, people are just not bored, and I'm so happy they're not bored, because there's so many shows I go to. If you hear the first two songs, you've sort of seen the whole range of what the artist can do.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And boredom is really not an option.
I guess being so diverse, it makes your music hard to categorise for those who like to pigeonhole music. Do you get amused by some of the comparisons your music receives?
Yeah, country. That is odd to me. Some people shelve me in the country bins.
Oh, right.
Yeah, that's different. I don't think they're looking at the music very carefully. I mean, if you've got a song like "Jesus Christ, Ain't I Lonely Tonight," which is a complete spoof of country music, I don't think, somebody's not reading the content label.
Yeah, well, they're not trying too hard.
That's right. That's right.
Interview with you recently where you spoke of ambitions of turning yourself into a jazz singer at some stage.
Well, I was one after I realized that I wasn't going to be an opera star. I started playing clubs around town and playing with jazz trios, and boy, those are, in another life, I'd be Bill Evans. I mean, just sit there at the piano and play, just play, smoke, chain smoke and play. And it seems I've written a whole a repertory of songs that are new standards. They sound like someone might have written them in the 40s, but they're contemporary. And that portion of my show always gets an extremely strong response. And I think because people really appreciate that kind of romance, a more formal approach to romance.
Yeah.
A more formal and tender approach to romance, and a less personal approach to romance. Instead of the details of the songwriter's life coming up in, I drank chai, for instance. Just a more general approach. It gives people more room to imagine themselves, and I think room to approach love with more, I don't know how to describe it exactly, just maybe with a little bit of sentimentality attached, or a little tenderness, and that it just seems as if that is so welcome. People enjoy that so much, and they come up and tell me. And I think somewhere on the horizon is going to be an album. Maybe after this next album, I'll do a whole album of those kinds of new standards.
Right. There's a nice element of humour in your work, and even speaking to you now, I can see you've obviously got a wicked sense of humour there. Is that important to you to avoid being bogged down with too much seriousness?
There's just so much posing out there. There's so much radio posing. There's so much performers adopt characters on stage that you meet them off stage, and they're really not like that. I just think when you talk to your friends generally are people that make you laugh, and I just try to get up there and act as if we're actually having a conversation for an hour and a half. If you were to talk to anyone for an hour and a half and they were deadly serious the entire time, I don't think you'd really include them in your circle of friends. And it's not that I need to be everybody's friend, but I just think there's a kind of honesty to a show that, if there's an entertainment component, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And it seems people are too.
Were you a pretty confident on-stage performer right from day one?
Yeah.
But that was never a problem for you?
No. Which can be good and bad. I mean, I could get out and perform some terrible song, and you'd find it somehow credible. You have to be careful if you have that kind of talent. You can get by doing really terrible material because you're such a credible salesperson. So you have to work to make sure that you're really connected to what you're saying and you're not cruising.
Yeah.
Just because you can sing it doesn't mean you should.
Pretty busy touring schedule. Are you able to write when you're on the road?
I just write little ideas in the back of a notebook and then come home and work on them. It's hard to write on the road. There's too many distractions. You have too much to do.
Yeah.
But then I come home, and on my days off, I'll have 1 or 2 writing days a week, and I'll pull the phone, and I won't talk to anybody until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. And then that's when things kind of work themselves out.
What would you say is your best quality as a songwriter?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's a long list, to be frank. I don't know. I think this can be good. This can be good and bad. I tend to think it's good. I think my songs are accessible. I think the songs, you can get them on one level on the first read, and some of the songs bear a third or fourth listening. But there's an immediacy to my show that people seem to respond to. It doesn't mean it's obvious. If you write poorly, it would fall over into obvious. But I think I like to think that the songs are available for you on the first read, and then if you want to go back and check them out, there might be more for you there. But I think there's an immediacy that I'm about as a person personally, and I'm about as a creative person too.
Have you changed your method or your approach to writing since the day you started?
I've grown more patient. I've grown a lot more patient. Some songs now take a month and a half to come together. And I used to write songs extremely quickly. They would just happen fast. But I think the fact that songs are taking longer to come together now means that the song's a little more considered. And that the images are more carefully chosen, and I think it makes for better songs. I'm happy for that patience, really. I'm happy for that.
What about covering other people's songs? You've had some interesting choices, and I think from your last album, Don McLean's Vincent was an interesting one. What made you cover a song like that that has been covered so many times in the past?
I'll be frank, I'm not sure that cover completely succeeds. I'm not completely convinced of that.
Yeah.
That idea came from my record company guy, and he said, just take a shot at this. Just take a shot at this. I'm like, oh, no, I can't do this. And I went into my producer, Daryl Scott, and I said, Daryl, I don't know about this. He said, look, let's just take out all the stuff we don't like in the song. We'll just take out the parts that we think are less than, I don't know, the parts that are difficult to relate to, or I don't want to get myself in trouble here, but there are some parts of the song that, to me, resonate less than others. And we kept the materials that we thought had the ability to connect, and we kept those. So you'll notice we only did about a third of the song.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I haven't heard from Don. I don't know if he's upset, but
if you had that time over again, would you stand firm and perhaps put your foot down and say not to do it?
I don't know. Sometimes you just have to try things.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just have to try things. I mean, we went over the songs we had as options at that moment. And I thought, well, that would require me to do something I wouldn't normally do. So let's do that.
Give it a go,
Let's stretch and give it a go, right?
What about your live work? Do you tour solo primarily, or do you have a regular band?
I'd like to have a band. I would take a band out on the road if they didn't eat. That's the only thing. If they didn't eat, then I would take them out. I have a road manager who travels with me and does all the arrangements and does the sound and that, and that's important to me to have those. But because I can do it by myself, I mostly do it by myself. It would be fun to have a bass player. I'd really like to do that. But more than that, you have to be careful so that the band doesn't overwhelm your ability to connect. And especially if you're a bit of a raconteuse, you're a bit of a smart aleck, if you're a bit of a chanteuse, then you don't want too much to clutter up your relationship to the audience. So doing the show by myself seems to allow that to happen.
Sure. And outside of the US, what would be your best markets?
Outside the U.S.?
Yeah.
Canada.
Canada?
No, we haven't done any UK. We haven't done any Australia.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to do, and then the record company went through this buy last year. So they, at that point, halted all external, all outside tours, and just focused on the U.S. and Canada until we get this all worked out.
Yeah, sure.
So I would very much like to see something like that come together.
And just before we wind up, Susan, your next album, what stage are we with that?
I sent some of the songs up to the record company, and they're listening to them now. And I haven't heard back from them yet. My manager just called, so I may have more news today. But it feels to me like most of the songs are in place. And I think this next album will be a little more gravelly, a little more electrified, a little more probably showing my prairie roots, sounding a little more rural, and a little more steel guitar, a little more slide, a little more... Maybe not steel guitar, but maybe a little more slide guitar, a little more pickup, and a little less outy. Does that make sense? A little more Ford 150 and a little less outy. How's that?
Excellent. So the songs are ready and set to go, basically. You're just waiting for the okay for the record company.
Yeah, just waiting for the green light. And if they don't give me the immediate green light, that's okay, because I have a whole bunch of songs sitting here waiting to be written too.
Fantastic. Okay, so it's been a treat talking to you. A lot of fun.
Hey, John, thanks so much. I'm trying to think how I can help you make this. You're going to write this, or are you going to broadcast this?
This will be broadcast, yeah. It'll be...
Oh, my God. You should have told me. I would have slowed everything down.
No, you're fine. We've got a good result here.
Oh, no. I didn't know that. Why didn't I think of that? You're from Australian Public Radio. Why wouldn't I think that?
I don't know, but not to worry. No, I'm quite happy. We've done really well.
How dumb am I?
Got about 20 minutes there. And I'll just intersperse that with some tracks, and it'll sound terrific.
All right. John, thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Take care, and
I appreciate it.
We'll keep our fingers crossed we get to see you down here one day.
I'd like that very much. Thank you, John.
Thanks, Susan.
Thanks now. Bye-bye.
Bye.